Hey, this is Russell Moore, and this is Reading in Exile, where we go through my library, pull out books, and talk about them, things that you should maybe check out for yourself and pay attention to. Today, I'm not going to talk about a book on the shelf because I'm going to talk about a book that doesn't exist, at least not in terms of something that can be pulled off the shelf yet. And that is several of you have asked about my new book project I've been working on for a long time. It's coming out this October, and I haven't been allowed to really talk about it by my publisher until now. But this is the cover of it. I put it up on Instagram and Facebook earlier today. It's called The Courage to Stand Facing Your Fear Without Losing Your Soul. And really what this book is about an understanding of gospel courage that is very different than what we typically think of when we think of courage. And I spent a lot of time in 1 Kings 19, particularly. Elijah, as he's going out on a pilgrimage toward Mount Horeb, and the way that he is experiencing loneliness, vulnerability, a sense of irrelevance. And one of the things that I noticed is if you just looked at this account and you saw Ahab and Jezebel and Elijah, Ahab and Jezebel would seem to be the ones who are more courageous, because we tend to think of courage in terms of aggressiveness, bombastic, bravado, that sort of thing. Not Elijah, who seems to be flat on his back at a point of vulnerability and isolation and so forth. But that is what courage actually, in a gospel sense, looks like, because courage is that call toward crucifixion. And so if you think about the language that Scripture uses of be not afraid, that command just keeps coming up over and over and over again in Scripture. And it seems to me that people act out of fear, and I know this in my own life, act out of fear in different sorts of ways that are all equally destructive. I mean, one of those ways is what I think a lot of people think of when they think of timidity, which is that withdrawal, or that sense of I'm just going to accommodate and appease whatever the culture is around me, whether that's the culture of my workplace, or the culture of my family, or the culture of my community, or whatever. I'm not going to question any assumptions. I'm just going to become small and invisible. But then there's another kind of operating out of fear that is what the Scripture would describe as a quarrelsomeness, seeking to lash out and to fight and to constantly be guarding against any picture of vulnerability, which is really a Darwinian view of reality, not a gospel biblical view of reality. Instead, I think what's happening in the life of Elijah is what happens ultimately in the life of every follower of Jesus Christ, which is we are brought to the end of all of our confidence and our heroism and our certainty. And we're asked that question that God asks to Elijah: where are you going? So it's not that courage is an absence of fear. It's that courage is an experience of fear. You actually come face to face with what it is that you're afraid of. Simon Peter walks out on the water and goes down in order to cry out, I'm drowning, rescue me, Lord. That happens in the life of every person. And so this book is really about where our fear comes from and how we are to overcome it in a way that isn't that sort of Darwinian reaction to fear, instead becoming Christ-like. So in this book, I talk about a lot of things that I've never talked about before. It's things that the Lord has taught me in this, and I hope that it will be of help and of encouragement to you, because everybody ultimately is dealing with a lot of scary stuff, and that shows up in different ways in different people's lives. But we're afraid of being hurt. We're afraid of being alone. It's one of the reasons why so few people are willing to stand alone when they need to. Fear of losing our place in the tribe, being exiled. We're afraid of losing our relevance. We have to maintain our relevance wherever we are in our lives. All of those basic fears that are there in human beings, I think those things are addressed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I think what's happening in the life of Elijah, the sort of the central defining moment of Elijah is not Mount Carmel, where he's calling down fire from heaven, that image of strength. That's part of his story, but I don't think that's the central point. I think the central point of his story is when he's out in the wilderness saying, I and I alone am left. And that is where he really sees a revelation of God that can uproot all of the potentialities he could have for trusting in idols in the way that the people of Israel done. And I think the same is true for you. I think that the same is true for me. So there are some of you who are scared right now. There are some of you who are going to be scared later on. And this book is talking to you from someone who is scared, and whose answer to that fear is not to build up more protection, but to say, Abba, Father, Lord, rescue. So that's the book, The Courage to Stand. It'll be out in October, and I look forward to talking to you about it then. This is Russell Moore. Let me know in the comments what books you would like for us to talk about here, and we'll be back next time on Reading in Exile.